I hope you all had a good summer. We are about to welcome our new class in a couple of days, so that's very exciting time for all of us. And so today we are gathering to listen to Dr. McCorkell to present his vision for the role of associate academic. Dr. McCorkell, you have known him longer than I have in some ways. Had a DBM from University of Saskatchewan. Then he practiced for many years in Alberta, owned his own business and practice. Then he went back to the academy to pursue an MSc degree and then a PhD, and came to UCDM as one of the founding faculty members. So he has been really focused into developing an outstanding teaching program, contributing to the curriculum, and the overall mission of the UCDM that was set up by the founding faculty and the other stakeholders in 2005-06 period. Dr. McCorkell is an accomplished reproduction biologist, and he is a brilliant teacher and a great debater, as I have known him. And so never short of on ideas and points, and so it's always very invigorating to engage with him on academic matters about DBM curriculum, research programs, or the nature of the faculty that we have. You know, he recently was appointed as an assistant dean admissions, and so that role is there, but he has also put his name forward for the associate dean academic. This role is very critical to our faculty as we enter into a curriculum revision, as we enter into preparation for the accreditation visit that comes up in February 2019, and also as we develop our teaching programs further in an evidence-based manner. So please join me in welcoming Dr. McCorkell as he presents this seminar and thanking him for putting his name forward for this very critical leadership role in our faculty. Rob, thank you very much. Look forward to your seminar.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, and welcome everybody for coming to this lunch hour in the middle of vast warm days of summer. I appreciate you taking the time to come and listen. First, I have to just mention my title. I've taken some criticism on it right away. It doesn't seem to be that profound. It's not that deep. And I have to say there's a bit of an origin story to it that I need to share with you. So I was looking for that really profound title and I spent some time scribbling things on paper, trying to figure out something I would say, and then you finally get frustrated, so you pick up the TV channel changer, and I started flipping through the channels to see what I could amuse myself with. Ended up on HBO, and there was a YouTube special on one of their concerts. So right away, I recognized that Bono would be there, and then it jumped into my head, Bono saying, the world needs more Canada. And then I immediately heard myself saying, no, the world needs more veterinarians. And I thought, the more I thought about it, that was actually the right context in my head for what I wanted to talk about. It's more of the larger reference of the term. I'm not talking about bums in the seats and people up there. The world just needs more from our profession. It needs more veterinarians. And so that's where the title came from, and I also get to use the celebrity on my presentation, which is always a bonus. Get the little guy here to work. And then, yeah, so this is supposed to be working. There we go. And so that's where I came from. I have a little bit more to explore with it, but as you can see, there's somebody trying to enter in from my last presentation, and there's an elephant in the room again, and it's me. So obviously faced with questions as to why am I putting my name forward. Usually they came in the format of, what's wrong with you? Are you all right? Are you having a crisis or hit your head? Why would you do this to yourself? And I understand the concern, but I have to assure you that I think I'm all right. It's also, I'm not putting my name forward because I think the world needs more Robert McCorkell. There's probably enough of that going on right now. And not contrary to how it might seem, I'm not just applying for every job that nobody else applies for. That's not my plan. And I'm not confused about what it is I want to do. But we have to bear in mind that recent circumstances, and very recent they are. I mean, in January, February of this year, I was working on a sabbatical plan and things going fine. And so recent circumstances have conspired to create the situation that we now find ourselves in. And when I considered that, I felt compelled to put my name forward again for much the same reasons that I did in the past, last spring. And basically the bottom line is I believe in our program, and I'm proud of the progress that we have made delivering it. And many elements of our program, when I'm talking here at UCBM, are personally important to me. There are incidents that occurred through my career that made some of the elements that we're going to talk about really important to me, and reasons why I feel it's important to deal with them. And it's also why I'm really happy to be working here at UCBM. And we would like to see those carrying on in the future. So, still dealing with the why question, because I think I have to work through this a little bit, maybe with all of these food theories. But anyway, all of my private practice was conducted in rural Western Canada. I spent 14 years in practice. The first bit was in Saskatchewan, and then the last 12 and a half years was here in Alberta in a small town. And I owned and operated the practice there. And so that gave me, I think, some really good insights into the burning issues that were facing the creation of UCBM when it was put together. Some of the motivation behind why it was felt necessary to put a college here. Those issues were real to me. I mean, I was living them or had lived them. And just to give you an idea of some of the things I saw in that process, and the things that I found exciting about this facility or this faculty. These are the issues that I ran into. So clearly, when you say a statement like, the future is multi-person practice, everybody goes, well, sure. But you have to think back to when I graduated. Most practices were small, 1, 2, maybe 3 members. And there's kind of a reason for that. They were all, well, mainly men. I have to give us credit for that, or criticize us for that coming forward. And the problem is we're all, aggressive, type A personalities, independent, maybe not so strong on patients, and not necessarily considerate of others' feelings when the emotions get tough. And so you find these practices all over the place. Small practices, all functioning along in a certain way. And then there was a few that I observed what I call supernovas. One morning you wake up and there's a 3-person practice nicely operating in this town. And the next morning you wake up and there's 3 one-person practices operating in that town. And then in the ensuing months, there'd be 3 two-person practices operating in that town. And it strikes you as, that's a problem. Because now there could be 1 6-man practice in that town. You can imagine all the bells and whistles you could have in a facility like that, and the lifestyle that you might be able to manage if you could all just get together under one roof and run a practice. So I saw that to be an issue or a challenge that our profession had to deal with if we were going to progress. And here at UCBM, it's one of the things that we actually deal with. It's right there, part of our curriculum. We spend a bunch of time worrying about how we do interpersonal skills and all that. That's actually pretty darn important. If we're going to go forward and have these multi-man practices operating, we have to be able to be considerate to one another and figure out, and that's part of the program. So that was, to me, that was a big deal. And the other one, the next one on my list there is the requirement of at least a minimal understanding of business practices. So when I was a student, WCBM flat out refused to put any type of business training in the curriculum. That's not veterinary medicine, that's not their problem. They aren't going to do it. So our class got together money, hired lecturers, came in at night to listen to somebody talk to us about law and give us a basic framework of doing business. It always struck me as being an odd way to do things. We know when we graduate our young veterinarians. They're going to be entering into a private sector business, a lot of them, small business. It's kind of going out there unarmed, I can tell you, is a big challenge. Capital is a precious thing. If you don't put it in the right places and use it properly, and it goes away, you're in big trouble. So it is important if you're going to be successful. It'd be really important if you're going to be successful in rural Canada. And so it's part of our process here. There are lectures, there is some time given in the curriculum to at least giving some basic information on how business operates and how you function within it. Another strong point I thought. And then, when I was a student, we had lots of primary care cases coming through the VTH. But when I went back as a grad student, it was quite obvious that process has started to break down a little bit. And to me, to build your confidence, to slowly warm your way up into the responsibility that you face as a veterinarian, starting with those primary care cases, building up your confidence and working into more challenging and sophisticated cases is the way to go. Rather than being dropped in as the last person in a long chain working on this really sophisticated or challenging disease that's sitting in the VTH. So right away, we didn't even have a VTH here. So that wasn't going to be a big problem. The problem was going to be getting everybody scattered around the province. But they were going to see the kind of cases that were going to help them build their confidence and build up their diagnostic skills early in their tour. So that's a really important part of UCVM to me. And in the same time, VTHs have lots of advantages. They allow great control. They've got all years involved in clinical cases. But you end up coming out with a certain view of how practice should be done, right? There's the WCVM method or the UCVM method we had at VTH. But the world isn't like that. And that's one of the other advantages we have here with our community of veterinary practices. You get to go out and see different practices, observe different practice styles while you're a student. So you end up with a broader view of how clinical practice is conducted. And I think that's really valuable. It helps you figure out how you're going to fit in and where you're going to go. And then, of course, there's the emphasis on rural placement. This had direct effect on me is because I think I was Dr. Heckler here, probably not. But one of the questions I was asked early on is how do we know if we're being successful here with getting graduates out into rural Canada? And my simple answer was the answer to the advertisements for employment. That's it. Because that was the difficulty I faced. You could place your ad, you wouldn't even get an inquiry. That's how dismal it was. So that's kind of hard when you're looking at your crystal ball and trying to figure out that manageable lifestyle and expanding your business, and nobody's coming to call. It makes you make life-changing decisions, I can tell you. And so that emphasis here that we are going to try and address it. Again, the other colleges kept doing the same thing they were always doing. There was this burning problem going on, but they weren't really, there was no obvious evidence that they were setting up to do something different, to try and make an effort to address this issue. They just kept doing what they were doing. We can't do that here. It's in all of our founding documents. It's front and center. We have to try. Will we be successful? Well, the future will judge. But at least we got to try. And I think that, to me, was encouraging. And then the areas of emphasis, to me, are also important. I know we've asked that question in the survey. We've talked to people, and not necessarily the response you get. But for me, the areas of emphasis are there to, as it states in the early documents, to serve the underserved areas of veterinary medicine. But by saying those words, the underserved areas of veterinary medicine, they tell you right away that all those areas are part of veterinary medicine. That's what we do. That's the bigger footprint. And to me, that's important. That's the DNA of our profession. And so that was important to me that was recognized. So back to this question. Yeah, so that's a picture I took in Alaska in June. That's what I was supposed to, when I was more entrained in the sabbatical idea. And so, yes, I am on sabbatical, though I know some people will be asking that question, and that is a real situation that we have to negotiate our way through going forward. Dr. Warren is sitting interim in the position, and we've spoken, and It is my intention that she maintains that position for a little longer. She has so far consented to do that. Though if I'm successful in this, my goal would be to finish off. There's a few things that I've set aside to do on my sabbatical that I need to get done, just for my own mental health. So yes, that's a thing. I'm working on it, and we will hopefully be able to accommodate that as we go forward. As I said, consequences conspire to create the situation we're in, and it's one of those things where your mind is over here, you're working on this thing, and somebody's yanking on your collar saying there's something over here, and then you finally look at it and you recognize, yeah, that is a problem. That is something that I'm worried about. And so as much as you want to go back the other, I could not address the situation that we're dealing with today. So, what is the underlying thing that pulled on my collar that made me feel like I had to deal with it today? And that is that at this point in the development of UCDM and our curriculum and those things, I just think that the Associate Dean Academic should be an internal hire. It should come from within our faculty. Preferably somebody who's been through the process of building the curriculum that we have, understands the process that we've been through and what we've accomplished. I don't think it's fully mature just yet. There are things we'll talk about going forward here that I think we have to address. But that was the bottom line to me. I think that this position is important enough. It still reaches down deep enough into lots of parts of the program that it should be somebody who's from within at this point in our development. Once the system matures, and I think we're very close to that, I wouldn't hold that going forward. But right now, that to me was the key. So as I said, I think it needs a little more time. The goal in my mind is to develop a stable and sustainable undergraduate DVM program. So one that, as the old saying goes, if I was to get, whoever in the ADA was to get hit by a bus, it would just carry on until you find somebody else who would be willing to step in and do the job. Right now, if we look at all of the responsibilities that are in this file, I'm not confident that that would be the way it would work. There's a lot of responsibilities that need to be covered off, and I just think the system needs to mature just a little bit longer. And that's really the underlying concern that I have, and why I put my name forward and why we're here today. So I want to see this project through to the finish. I mentioned the goal. I think it's very close. Needs a little more time. Dr. Singh had mentioned the accreditation coming in February 2019. That's the bright light on the head of the train that's coming towards us, that we need to be able to satisfy those requirements. And I come to this not completely naive. As I said, I've been here since August of 2008, so I wasn't here at the very beginning of the process, but shortly thereafter. Participated in innumerable discussions and meetings and retreats as we built and developed the 4 years of the program. I sat on the curriculum committee for 2 years in the middle of that, so even more meetings and more discussions on curriculum-related items. And as you know from previously, I spent 7 years on the admissions committee, 7 of the last 10 times I've been there, so quite a bit, but that's closely related to the curriculum or admitting students to the program. So these issues are not distant to me, and I've been aware of them, and so that's why there's some passion in there for me for it, and why I feel like I'm confident enough to stand for the position. So, hopefully with why dismissed. If I haven't convinced you that my reasons are sound and proper, please inform the selection committee and they can release me of this responsibility and I'll go back to my sabbatical. But you understand what's going through my head at this time. So, maybe a more fulsome title at this point. When I said the world needs more veterinarians and they need to be doing more. And this is a concept that I've had in my head for a long time, and I think it goes back, we'll talk about it, goes back to my time as a student. But first off, as I said before, I'm solidly behind the founding objectives and our mission that the college has put in place. These were the 6 founding objectives that were later massaged into the mission, and then we now have derivatives of these throughout our literature. And you can see that in those comments there are the relevant to Alberta's current and future animal and public health needs, focus on servicing rural Alberta. The graduate veterinarians have practical veterinary professional skills. Obviously we're addressing that very strongly in the program. Creating the veterinary expertise to support rural development and sustainability. Again, it shows up in those founding missions. Developing research-intensive faculty. Obviously, as was mentioned, I've been involved with research. This is, to me, a component of equal weight to the clinical side. It's not its younger brother or little sister. It's an equal weight of our profession, and the two need to go forward together. And so that's my view of the big picture, of how it supports this college. It's interesting when you look back in time, some of the factors that helped, as I mentioned already, that helped create UCDM were factors in my life that changed and shaped my career. And one of them that's quite interesting was BSE. This case occurred on my client's farm. This is the first case of BSE, 1993. And, it's just interesting how these new diseases come up and show up and suddenly create great relevance to us as veterinarians. There wasn't a lot of hubbub that came out of this. There was 20 or so British origin animals that were sourced out and culled throughout the country. And my client lost his herd. They depopulated that herd. But 10 years later, when the next diagnosis was made, that's when a big, massive economic disaster fell upon the province. And it was this disease that generated a lot of the political heat that went on to get Premier Ralph Klein at the time to announce in an election that there's going to be a veterinary college in Calgary. So it was just interesting how that happened and came about. And in between the time of this episode and the next one, 10 years later, in 2003, I left private practice and was trying to make a plan, I had a plan, to make a more manageable lifestyle. There was, because I couldn't get the staff that I needed to flesh out my practice. I guess for me, most of my practice career was either a single man practice or 2. My best rotation was 12 days of work, 2 days off, and 7 nights of call. And when you have small children, it gets a little wearing. It's just, your summers are 5 weekends. It's kind of shocking when you look at it. So I had gone back to graduate school, and there was a new industry starting up with farming of deer and elk, and I was trying to make myself more valuable to them. That was my goal. Well, a related disease, CWD, laid waste to all those plants. That was diagnosed in 2000, and we're still, my colleagues in the deer business are still just pulling out of that now. So what is this, 17 years. So that pretty much damaged that industry. But I have some good memories of it. These are my kids. Back, oh gosh, maybe almost 20 years ago, I look at those pictures, now maybe 17. And there we are, bottle racing some white-tailed deer. And so another time when a disease that was kind of new shows up and had major impact on my life and my career. And so these lessons have come along, and I have to reflect and say, what are the past 30 plus years of veterinary medicine that I've been a member of it, what have they taught me? What do I see with it? And where are we going in relation to this position? I see a massive role for our profession in society. And massive is not an incorrect term. It's just, really when I look at it, our profession touches the lives of everybody. Our fingerprints are in multiple places, all over the place, everybody, every single day. I don't think we get, as a profession, that much credit for that. I see that we operate quietly and efficiently in the background, but we're there. And so it's a very important profession. And I just want to highlight some of those areas that pop into my mind when I think about it. And the food supply is huge. You know, the production of protein and dairy products, that's something that we're involved with all the way through. And when I say individual herd, when you even think about it, we're involved with getting the gametes together. That's how involved we are. Right from that point, making a successful gestation to successful birth to growth, all along there. There's veterinarians and veterinary research supporting that whole thing, and you name the species. We have colleagues that are working with fish now, and even invertebrates. There are some working on mollusks and those kind of. So food supply, you know, is where we probably have, well, I'm not going to say the largest, but we have a massive footprint. Very quiet. You don't hear about that much. They don't make the news as often. That's good. You want to know our food supply is having a problem, but it's something that should be acknowledged more often. You know, the food safety, hygiene, the research that supports it, the humane treatment of animals. I see lots of veterinarians involved with that. Humane slaughter, husbandry issues. I just was involved with writing the code of practice for bison. These are things that we're intimately involved with and trying to teach people and make sure that animals are handled properly and in the process of producing our food. And when they enter the food supply, they still are veterinarians involved. You think of the slaughterhouses, you think of carcass inspections. We're, like I said, we're all over that. That's an important thing. And I think here locally, we have our own Dr. Cross, the College of Discovery, Creativity, and Innovation, starting up there, and the first global challenge he's laid out there for the class of 2017, or this year's class, feeding 9 billion people. I can't see, that's just when I see that, I just see veterinarians. That's a huge process. How are we going to do that? And we're going to be heavily involved in that process. And then as my list goes on, they have the high-profile parts of our practice, clinical practice, companion animal medicine. And I think when you go out and pull people on the street, this is the type of person they think of when you ask them what does a veterinarian do. And this is really becoming increasingly important. We're recognizing it. As human beings, we've evolved to need to interact with animals. We're finding now, we use these, if you come around here at the university campus on exam time, there's a room dedicated with dogs and puppies in it for you to help relieve your stress. We bring them to our old folks' homes. We take them to hospitals. So being around and close to animals is important to us, and to important parts of our family. And it's important that we deliver the care and need and attention that those animals require. Another big role that veterinary medicine plays. And then we talked about it maybe a little bit in passing, the increasingly important role involving zoonotic and new diseases. And this one, you can just start rhyming them off, right? You know, there's SARS, West Nile virus, H1N1, swine flu, Ebola, Zika virus. All of these viruses keep popping up, or organisms keep popping up with new pathogens and diseases. The interesting thing behind them all is they generally came from some animal reservoir, and somehow that bridged the gap and got into humans, and then caused a big disaster, or potentially. But that's the interesting thing. They're in some animal reservoir. So some animals out there right now are living with these diseases, but they're not really ill. And they provide the clues then. How would we study those animals? We then might know what's necessary for prevention or treatment in humans, what angle, what approach to take. And so that's veterinarians, my world. We study the health and disease of vertebrate animals, maybe some invertebrates as well, I mentioned that. But that's our bailiwick. We need to be out there and understanding where these what organisms our animals are dealing with, and do they have the potential to cause us grief? And if they do, how do we approach that once the disease shows up in people? Then there's a new area showing up in the conservation of species. Back to Jay's challenge of 9 billion people. Well, with 9 billion people on the planet, we're kind of pushing other animals into uncomfortable places, and some of them are having trouble surviving. We have a role in figuring out how those animals are going to survive. Again, we study their health and disease. We can come up with options and ideas that can provide a niche or prevent them from becoming ill or other diseases from threatening them. That's something that we can serve it. And at the very end of it, we also have techniques available to perhaps conserve their germplasm that maybe someday we can use to resurrect them, or if possible. So another area that I see veterinarians in, and then I throw up there this climate change. It's just the environment that we're living in right now. News is Houston, you know, the disasters they're having down there. There's a lot going on in our environment that's changing and has a direct effect on the animals that we need to use for food, the animals that we live with, and our animals in wild spaces that we still want to keep. And we have a role in figuring out how that adaptation is going to take place. What animals can adapt, what they can't, how do we make this work? And when I throw on there two little animals that I find kind of curious, the ticks and mosquitoes, it's interesting to me, and our parasitologist friends in here will be able to note that. It's interesting how as climates change, they move up. So we're having tick species that we didn't used to have to worry about showing up. And they just recently, I think, trapped the mosquito in eastern Canada that's responsible for transporting the Zika virus. So these insects bring with them their pathogen friends, and so diseases that as a student I used to just not worry about and because they're never going to affect me in Canada, now they're affecting me in Canada. And the one that I always like is Babesia, just because it's a fun name. Babesia, babesiosis, you learned all about it, but that's never going to be here. It's here. So we got, as veterinarians, and I actually bumped into Babesia more than nearly 20 years ago, and now it's even more common problem. So we are kind of the sentinels, if you will, canary in the coal mine. We'll bump into these diseases and become aware of them, and also aware that these tick species or those kind of things are starting to invade the environment. Certain parasites are showing up more commonly in our livestock. That's something that's definitely going to be, the society is going to rely on us to be part of bring that to our attention. And this is kind of the public health becoming one health, recognizing that, you know, vertebrate animals include humans, so we're all kind of in the same pile. Diseases will go everywhere. So that's just an idea of why I think that we have such a massive footprint in society and a massive role to fill. And possibly why you can say we need more veterinarians. We have a big job ahead of us. And so, just as I believe it's our mandate, and it says it all over our literature, to get those students to go and answer those advertisements, and let my rural colleagues know that there are students that are willing to come out there and do the work, I also think it's our job to encourage graduates to explore these other areas. And they aren't as easy to get into, but we have to build a base with them. They have to be able to consider that possibility. And so that's one of the challenges I see. The areas of emphasis, as I said, those are, if you think about them, I know there's been lots of discussion in our faculty. Some people get anxious that they don't have an area of emphasis. I say to you, if that's the case, that's because your area is not underserved by reflection. That means it's a dominant position in the current situation, and that should make you comfortable. The areas of emphasis are to try and bring up the underserved areas to see that we dealt with all of our responsibilities. And that's the way I view that. And I think that challenges, so I said that this is kind of recognizing the DNA of veterinary medicine, but this challenges us to produce the RNA. We actually got to go in there and read the DNA and produce something. That's what the challenge to UCDM is, and I think that's a big challenge, and I think that's a great challenge, something we need to keep in top of mind as we go forward. So, how do we do this? We have a DVM curriculum. We've struggled with this. Everybody has. We have constraints. We have problems. And I think, to me, the base to the whole thing, this goes back to my days as a graduating veterinary medicine, you need a solid foundation in comparative medicine. That's the base that allows all the opportunities, directions to be followed. So we have to keep that at the top of our heads when we're talking about our curriculum and how we deliver it. We can't weaken that. We must maintain it as best we can, given the challenges that we face. And this was sort of instilled with me. This was my first dean, Dean Nielsen. This was a lecture that he gave in the paper that published shortly thereafter, right at the time of my graduation. And it resonated with me then, and now, all these years later, it still resonates with me. I particularly like his Roman columns diagram. And so he has the comparative medicine as the base, and then all of the columns supporting the big roof that's veterinary medicine. And so that, I remember that image. I liked it then. I like it now. I still think that that's what we always have to keep in our heads when we're working on curriculum and our program. I also like his definition of comparative medicine. And it's a phenomenon basic to disease of all species, foundation of both veterinary and human medicine, and to flourish requires a broad biological approach and outlook. Well, those are, to me, important. And that's what we've got to be careful we don't whittle away at that too much, because that gives us possibilities that the profession has to offer. And since then, there have been lots of publications that have looked at the futures of veterinary medicine and the direction we take. And the interesting thing about all of them, they all highlight that same feature. The base is comparative medicine. Those are things that we have to pay attention and keep at the forefront of our minds when we're designing. We can get distracted in different ways. We realize that we're constrained by rules and licensing bodies, all kinds of challenges we face when we're trying to build a program. But the base to me is very important. So, where does that take us? Where are we now? And bearing in mind now you kind of know my perspective and how I view it. As I said earlier, I think we're close to the goal of a stable, sustainable undergraduate program. The key to this whole challenge, in my mind, is that attaining that fully accredited program. So we have the COE's blessing. Our students can sit the NAVLE and are passing at high rates. It pleases the needs of Campus Alberta. That's the community we live in, and pleases our political masters, the government of Alberta. There are a lot of boxes you have to check off to get a program that does all that. We've spent years building this one. We have it, we just need a little bit more work on it, let it mature, and there it'll be. And that, to me, is the key. You can use that key then to open the doors to those other challenges that I laid out in front of us. And that's how I see it. Once we build it, once we have it now, we maintain it, and we keep it meeting all those requirements. That's the hard piece, in my mind. It requires, where are we at with it? Well, the curriculum review process is in place. We're busy studying the curriculum. There's, as you can easily imagine, there are things that we have discovered in there that require modification. I know the tweaks are not major. We're not going to redo the whole thing. And the curriculum review process has identified those. It'll come up with a strategy which those processes can be, or those issues can be attended to. I'm not going to go into them too much right now because I don't want to get ahead of our committee who's busily working on that report. But the idea behind that is that there are short, medium, and long-term issues that will arise from that curriculum review. Some of the short ones are clearly to deal with the next big challenge, which is the accreditation in 2019. Some of those things, some of the issues that have been identified in review, we're going to have to deal with before, or to have them ready in February of 2019. That's a little over a year from now, so that's a big challenge in some of them. Others will have a longer timeline, but those timelines must be respected. That information is going forward to the provost. They're going to expect us to live up to it. So coming out of the review process is going to be a list of to-dos and how one might do them. And so that, but I think that obviously this office is going to be important to deal with and move forward in the next few years. But that's all, I see as all part of that maturing process of the program we have right now. They aren't going to be majorly, nothing will be majorly different than what we have right now. We're going to make it sustainable going forward. The other process that's on right now, and I see Kristen is here, we've got this massive curriculum map. She somehow managed to jam all of this information into a giant spreadsheet that allows us to sit back and review and look at what we have done or what we are doing or what we think we are doing. And that allows us some efficiencies. We can figure out how to make the system a little more streamlined. We're stuck in this paradigm of a 4-year program. That's the way the world is. We have this to need, in my mind, to have a strong base in comparative medicine. We have all of the other directions pulling, all got to be done in that little window. So something like a curriculum mapping is going to be very helpful, and that's coming together as we speak. It will be an opportunity for us to review that in the next coming months and years, and figure out how we can do a better job, a more efficient job of accomplishing those goals and make the program more efficient going forward. And I think that's, we don't want to talk too much longer, because I'm sure that people will have questions. But that's the process that I see in the next immediate future. We have the information coming from the curriculum review committee we have to deal with. We have the accreditation process, and we have the information from the curriculum map. The program is pretty good shape. Just needs to mature a little bit, and then I think it will be a stable program going forward. I don't. So what I want everybody to understand is I'm not here to tell you that I'm going to redesign or that thing. Anyway, any more questions? Then go ahead.
Thank you, Rob, very much. Questions for Rob? From Spy Hill?
Jacob.
Oh, yes, Jacob.
Well, I was still thinking about your title, that is, world needs more veterinarians. That's what you put first. So that gives me an impression that our graduates will have the opportunities not just limited to Alberta or Canada, they have the opportunities elsewhere in the world. So how do you think, how well we are preparing our graduates to meet the needs of our international community? It's not, because everything that you mentioned pretty much limited to Alberta or Canada. So how do you think, how well we are preparing our graduates for beyond Canada?
And that's me. Once the process gets more and more complex, but I'm not sure I totally agree with your assertion that what I said just deals with Alberta. Again, if the base is strong, we have a comparative aspect. We're looking at the roles that veterinarians play in society, and we have the students have the opportunity to choose how they want to serve. When I look at the world, the questions that face the rest of the world aren't a whole lot different than ours. Some of them are more basic. They come back. We're more advanced here in the West, say, but they're still same old problems. Right? We need to get no production without reproduction. We need to deal with basic diseases that occur. We have to deliver the medicine in a cost-effective manner. They're all pretty similar. Just being aware of the environment that the other parts of the world bring, that's fairly challenging for us to do. To know what the circumstances are, say in South America, or if we go to other parts of the world, go to Africa, or those areas. That's the environment there. That would be something that if you are challenged to go ahead and pursue those interests, that's something that you have, as a graduate, you're going to have to work on and develop those skills. but we can give you the tools that you're going to need in those environments. Are you going to talk about where I was from?
Yeah, I know where you're from.
Okay.
No, I'm not. So I do disagree a little about the tweaks. I think tweaks are required, but I honestly get the feeling our curriculum has become a bit of a beast. And I know this because I spent a good part of the summer trying to plug holes where it was hemorrhaging, where we're having a hard time actually filling chairships, we're having a hard time finding course coordinators. I've just finished the academic performance review, so I know where everyone in the department's teaching. And most of them teach even throughout the summer. And what I'm getting at is they're really starting to get tired. There's a fair bit of burnout. People are looking at other places. We rely very heavily on sessionals. And the sessionals are great, but our own faculty have to do a lot of the background work so the sessionals can come in and teach their chunk. So I guess that's one thing I'm wondering as dean of the curriculum, how do you make that aspect more sustainable? Because it's something I see as a department head, and it's something I have to try and deal with. And my feeling is we need quite a few more people to make this much more manageable. Or we need to package the curriculum differently so people aren't teaching all through the season, winter term, spring term, summer. That's where I see some of the challenges. So although I agree we've got a great curriculum, it is a bit of a beast.
I won't argue with you. I mean, I know that people. And it was something I remember many years ago. We were developing the program, figuring it out, and people were at that time. Everybody was pulling in the harness pretty hard together, right? We all were trying to get things. And you know that as it matures, that effort can't be sustained. And then at that time, the idea of having people. Well, we were trying. I think the one that I'm getting to is I think it was the second year program where they were going to try and march the year along in this kind of a lockstep fashion, so that you might be teaching 3 times this week, and then you won't be in the classroom until